I'm Jenny Fines, reporting for World Bites, asking the people in Hackney what they think about copyright laws. Have you ever bought a pirated DVD or downloaded any music?
I don't see myself as a criminal for doing it. Just I don't see it as a big crime. It's more deviant than criminal, I'd say. So yeah, I've done it before.
Are you worried about the industries losing out because of the illegal downloading?
Lily Allen and artists like that started up from MySpace, where everything was free and things. I don't think they're missing out on a lot. I think they'll make their money in marketing and other places, I think. So yeah.
I contribute to the film industry by, buying DVDs, legal DVDs, but if I can get it for free or at a cheaper price, why would I pay a higher price for the same thing? In the business world, in order for a company to survive, they always have to compete with the competitors. So if they want to survive, they definitely have to reduce their prices.
Well, what do you think about people breaching copyright?
I don't really think that copyright is a good thing.
Why is that?
Because I believe that most of the things, most of the ideas which are here and most of the sounds and also most of the pictures are just flowing around. So they are somehow for everyone, and they are used from everyone. And what we as artists doing is just collecting and pitching together, and pitching together new ideas, out of this stuff which is around.
Are you an artist?
So, yes, I am. So therefore, I think the copyrights doesn't really secure the artist's rights. They secure the rights of the corporations much more than the artist's rights.
But if there isn't copyright, or if there was not copyright, how would artists make money?
There are a lot of possibilities to make money as artists, and there are a lot of possibilities to not make money as artists and to live as artists.
So if you saw someone selling a pirated version of your work in Broadway,
really glad.
You would be really glad?
Yeah, of course, I would be really glad.
Yeah? Okay. Do you think copyright limits expression in some ways?
I don't know, I'm making 3 music videos this month. I'm getting paid for one of those. I probably have more expression on one that I don't get paid for than one that I do get paid for.
I am from DACS, the Design and Artists Copyright Society, and we represent the copyright and related rights for thousands of visual creators from the UK and internationally. So we pay visual artists royalties from the exploitation of their work, and last year we paid over £9 million to creators. But copyright law, in fact, is 300 years old this year. It was in 1709 that the Statute of Anne was passed. And this law gave authors of books the right to control the publication of their work and to gain royalties from it. Prior to that, it was only the publishers who benefited. And when it was created, this copyright, it was given a time limit. And it sought to strike a balance between private and public interests by limiting the number of years that copyright lasted. And so since then the law has been through many permutations, but the essence of it remains the same, that copyright recognises the needs for creators to retain control over their ideas and to reap some financial reward when their ideas are exploited by others. Firstly, copyright finances creativity. Copyright allows a creator to earn more money from their work, which means that they can focus on creating more work. Secondly, copyright stimulates quality creativity. And that's not to say that copyright, that the creativity should be posh or exclusive. It means that it gets higher quality creativity than My Holiday Snaps, for example. And thirdly, copyright gives creators control over their work. They get to say yes or no when their work is used, and they get to ensure that the integrity of their work is respected. Now, interestingly enough, for music, 90% of songwriters earn less than £10,000 a year from their royalties. So we really are talking about small amounts of sums, small amounts of money. So it makes their copyright really, really important for them as a source of income. It helps them to keep on creating. And if we remove that mechanism by which our creators are paid for their work, then our creators end up getting jobs at McDonald's or finding some way of supplementing their income in order to support themselves and their creativity. Now, digital technology has transformed the way that our creators create and how we, the audience, interact with their creativity. The internet provides amazing opportunities for creators to reach a global audience without massive startup costs, and it generates a huge potential global audience for their work. But it brings with them massive risks because, unfortunately, many people think that if it's on the internet, then it's free to use. This attitude, however, is starving our creative talent, literally. An important point about copyright, and one which I really value, is that the owner of that copyright is able to decide to use this right how they wish. They can benefit from it, so gain money from it, they can sell it, and they can give it away. It's theirs to use as they wish. However, that is a decision that we should not be making for them while we're illegally downloading their music from the internet. A common criticism of copyright is that it gives the author, artist, or musician too much control over their work, and that the public rights to access creativity is restricted by artists. I find this personally quite astonishing. Why should we expect our creators to pour out their time and energy and talent solely to benefit the rest of us in society? Why should we expect our artists to work for free? Certainly many of us would think twice before being asked to work for free. If I had any talent as a creator, I would want to ensure that I had some say in how my creativity was used.
I really can't say in good conscience that copyright benefits the arts, as the motion is phrased. I think art and the industries associated with it are very different things. I think art will exist for as long as humans have language and culture and ideas about transcendence that differ us from animals. And I think the creative industries and the entertainment industries are rather transient and conflicted things, and they're going to rise and fall depending on a variety of broader circumstances and variables. And it's a fiction, a lie even, central to copyright and to intellectual property in general, is the idea that the labour of the individual creator correlates to the value or the quality of their creation. That there's a direct correlation between the two. It's unsurprising and quite helpful that the industry makes out there's a correlation between the two. It needs a systematic way to remunerate people and to manage its affairs. But I don't think there is, in fact, a direct correlation between the two. I think the energies that go into a creation are a combination of the energies of the creator, the energies of everyone who created a work that he's encountered previously, the energies of everyone who he may have spoken to and influenced him, and the various different circumstances and discoveries in which he's found himself over the course of his life. It's contingent. It's not all in his conscious, directive control. I think the sort of fictitious character of intellectual property, the fact it's this legal invention, it's not written down in stone, it doesn't really have a material basis in the creative process. I think you find this out pretty quickly if you try to distinguish legally between copies and adaptations and homages and parodies and quotes. The legal methods of distinguishing between these things are fairly arbitrary and haphazard. And if two people find themselves in a legal dispute over whether or not something falls into one or the other category, it's a fairly good bet that the lawyer paid the most can put the most favourable complexion on the work in question. The construct also falls down pretty quickly when you try and extend it to conceptual art, where the concept of the art hasn't actually been translated very much, and is all. Whether it's Martin Creed's Turner Prize installation, where you switch lights on and off in an empty room endlessly, I think most of us have violated that piece of copyright. Or Tracey Emin's famous artwork, My Bed, Her Messy Bed, which I've violated the copyright on that when I've woken up every morning for as long as I can remember. So that's one preconception, the fact that the idea that intellectual property has some natural or material basis in creations and the creative process. There's also a preconception that what happens when an artist creates art is they create it by themselves and then they give it to a grateful rest of humanity. I think it's as true, or maybe even more true, to say that humanity is constantly expressing itself in the aggregate through individual artists. And if there's any gratitude to be had, that gratitude might run both ways. One way of thinking about the history of art is as humanity having a long conversation with itself, a conversation that happens on a very large scale of continents and centuries, and that cannot be reduced to individuals. In fact, in as much as individuals do arise, great artists and so on, it's actually a sort of implied version of them that is created, that lives in our mind, rather than the flesh and blood individual. Certainly when I think of Shakespeare, I don't think of a man who ate breakfast every morning. If he worked in McDonald's, I don't think I'd think of him as the man who worked in McDonald's. I think of him as a figure who lived at the threshold of modernity, and who was able to write what he did because of various dynamics historically at the time. I think there's a misconception that copyright was devised because, and it was devised after, somebody decided that creators deserved some reward for their work. I don't think that's quite how it happened. I think an opportunity was spotted to reap reward from art because it was very scarce and difficult to reproduce when the technical means to publish and distribute and reproduce it were quite primitive. So there was an opportunity there. And it is an opportunity that's coincided with a change in the way we conceive of geniuses over the last few centuries, where the individual rather than the collective has been elevated as an important legal and social and creative figure. Not a negative development, there are many good things about it, but the fact that happened at the same time as this opportunity has led us to naturalise the assumption that artists deserve and must be furnished with a living. Just because that assumption seems natural to us doesn't mean it's the correct one, doesn't mean it shouldn't be questioned. And if it's coming under pressure because of modern developments, it doesn't automatically deserve to be defended at all costs. The debate about this subject is very important and welcome. When I hear the likes of Tanya say, we really need to do something about these problems, we need to respect copyright more, we need to sort out what's going on the internet, or else our artists are going to starve, what I would like is the opportunity to call that bluff. I think it's important to be honest about this. I'm not going to say the way I think artists are going to earn money in future is by doing X, Y, and Z, by selling T-shirts at their concerts, by using this piece of technology, by doing all... There's loads of interesting stuff going on. I've got lots of examples. We can talk about it in the debate, and hopefully it'll work out and it'll help people. But there's no guarantee of that, and it would be dishonest of me to say that there was. There's no guarantee of it, but that doesn't make copyright morally defensible or good for the arts. You asked Tanya, you find it astonishing that we should expect artists to create for nothing. I don't expect anything of artists. I've never or rarely asked an artist to create something. I'm in a supplicant role here. I'm a consumer, and a market has given me a plate of stuff to choose from, the crumbs from its table. I didn't enter into that bargain. I'm not necessarily particularly attached to it. One of the few things I did pay for in advance was when a band called Marillion asked us to pay for their album a year before it came out so they could afford to hire a studio without using a record company. I'm not saying that's the model for everyone, but it worked in that instance. A bit of lateral thinking goes a long way.
I was just wondering about whether you think copyright law actually properly stifles the arts by creating monopoly and commercialising an essentially fluid and passionate business. I mean, after all, were the Beatles not their happiest when playing in the Cavern in Hamburg when they were poor back in the early 60s?
My question to you is, what makes art labour different from any other labour? Because you said that art is, given to humanity by the individual, and you infer basically that the creators shouldn't receive rewards for their creations. But previously being a writer yourself, isn't it hypocritical to argue against, something that protected you?
Well, how is my publisher going to keep this nice publisher going to keep going if it can't protect its copy? Protecting its copy is not an internally guaranteed way to make its living. I think it's something of a losing wicket, to be honest. I think a direct appeal to the people who like it and who might want to keep it going. It may not sound sustainable, and it's not the same thing as an industry, but it may be the best option available to them. Similarly to people who may not be able to build a career. Well, nothing's handed to you on a plate. A lot of people at the moment can't get a job, much less one that they enjoy. It's not dictated anywhere that anyone who thinks they're good at music is entitled to a music career. Life's tough. It's not the best of all possible worlds, but making it better, I don't think is best done through copyright.
Don't you think that the argument about we should have copyright laws to stop people from stealing other people's ideas shows a distinct lack of trust and faith in people? That you think if copyright laws didn't exist, we'd all rush out and download everything for free and refuse to pay artists anything?
If we got rid of copyright, I'm sorry, I have great faith in the innate goodness of the human race, but I know you all would go out and download. Like, really, that's the reality of it. So, anyway, that was a basic response, really, to a very complex question, and I'm sorry for decrying, obviously, a group of very good people. Copyright controlling the improvement of the arts. Well, the beautiful thing about copyright is that it remains the property of the creator to exercise how they wish. It's all about respecting the creator. And chances are, and I know this because I talk to the artists themselves, and I've heard musicians say the same thing, they are totally fascinated with what people are doing to their work, with mashups, with using their stuff, with reinterpreting it, with having fun, with experimenting. What they want is you to ask permission to respect their ownership and of that work. So they want you to come and ask them. And then if you guys are going out and making cash of what you've done with their creativity, then they want a slice of that pie because you're commercially exploiting their work. It's not that certainly when I talk to creators, they're not interested in stifling creativity, but they want respect. And copyright is that mechanism which requires us to respect what they deliver to us as a society.
You can't require someone to respect someone. Why not? Respect is earned, not given. What I said earlier about the balance between the private benefit for the creator and the public benefit for from the creation, that's in terms of economic rights. Who earns the money? And American copyright law has traditionally been founded on this notion of the economic rights. France is hung up on the notion of moral intellectual property rights, which are insane. They assume that a work has a life of its own and a right not to be impugned. They assume that when Marcel Duchamp drew a little moustache on the Mona Lisa, that somehow the Mona Lisa suffered. Last time I looked in the Louvre, she was fine. She had not suffered. I'm not a big fan of France in relation to its contribution to this discussion. I'll end with this question of what makes art labour different from any other labour. Before this discussion, Tanya and I were talking, and we were surprised to discover that I had more respect for patents than Tanya does because of their necessity of patents when organising and developing pharmaceutical drugs on an industrial basis. Because I could see, although I don't think the pharmaceutical company occupies an automatic moral high ground, why in the world we live that arrangement might be necessary, at least for now. With copyright, I just don't see it. The interesting thing about creative works, the sort of things that are subject to copyright rather than patent, is they really highlight the arbitrariness of the relationship between what something costs and why it is that we think it's worthwhile, because those two things really jar. And actually, once you start thinking about that, it's pertinent to the rest of the economy, and it relates to things called use value and exchange value that people on the left were interested in a long time ago, and maybe they still are. But that's what art brings out. Effectively, what makes it different from any other labour is that it gives us a glimpse of a world where labour as we know it, it doesn't exist.
Hi, I'm Adina Bilal reporting for World Bites. I'm here at Wood Green Shopping City to find out people's views and opinions on copyright laws. Do they help or hinder the arts?
Copyright laws do quite well at protecting the artist from being ripped off too much. Although I think they are being controlled a little bit by the production companies higher up.
Well, a lot of the things we do stem from other people's work, and you get creative development by basing your work on other people and doing adaptations of it and things like that. So, and copyright laws can actually restrict this. So what do you think about that?
There was a saying that there's no new stories anymore. I can't remember who said that. And there was a very old philosopher once said there's only 12 types of story you can go from. So everything's kind of based on everything anyway. It depends on how much how close a new piece is to a copied piece or a source of inspiration. I know there's something in America called orphan laws being put through, where if you find a piece of work on the internet or just anywhere and you can't find who's done it, then you can claim it as your own or use it without restriction. That just opens a massive problem.
Do you think that copyright laws help or hinder the arts?
I think they hinder them at the moment, the current state they're in, particularly with music copyright, illegal downloading, that kind of thing. Arts are meant to kind of encourage and breed arts, so if you try and stifle that, then you're going to stifle future creativity. I'm a music journalist and I find tons of stuff because someone will send me like a download or a CD they've copied, and if I like the band I'll go and see them or I'll give them a good review, and I wouldn't do that if I was paying £10 for every album I had to listen to.
No, I feel that copyright laws are right, actually. We're quite good because we tend not to buy fake stuff like fake films and all that, because I do believe that they are entitled to their money.
So do you think that anyone has the right to own an idea?
To own an idea?
Or say that this idea is strictly mine and, no one deserves the right to use it?
Depends what it is, really. I suppose everyone has got the right to own something about themselves, as in you have property. If you have a house, you are protected from anyone entering. An idea is a lot more of a fluid kind of concept. It's not something solid, but at the same time, depends on what it is and what it's used for. Yeah, there need to be something there. So, I mean, it will be interesting. There could be all sorts of effects onto arts if the copyrights were totally abolished. Many of them will be positive, I'm sure, but there will also be negative. I'm sure there will also be negative results. So it's balancing the two and getting really, if it's for the greater sake of art, then what's the best for it? But if there's no copyright laws, I suppose people would also be inclined to use other people's ideas rather than create their own ideas, since they're free and they don't have to pay for it.
Like if, for instance, it was a school play, making them pay royalties to things like musicals and things, I don't think that should be done. But obviously, musicians have got to make their money from somewhere. But I think there has to be a line somewhere.
So for how long do you think an idea or a piece of work belongs to a person and copyright law should be put on it?
That's a good question. I really don't know. Maybe until the person dies, I don't know. I think after then, although the family do get the royalties, I think it's only really belongs to that person until they die.
They certainly hinder the arts because the use of intellectual property, which effectively is what copyright's all about, limits people's ability to, shall we say, spin their ideas out.
So, do you think that amateur filmmakers should be allowed to put music in their films for free?
Yes, definitely. Provided it's accredited. I'm doing an OU course. I use a lot of material that other people have got copyright on. Provided I give them accreditation, that's fine. If I don't do that, then I'm stealing.
Surely this whole thing has come about because people used to charge CDs at $15.99. Then we found a cheaper way of finding them, which was on the internet. And now, suddenly, the music industry is going, oh, where's all our money gone? When it should have, if it was them being money grabbing at the beginning, and now they're getting upset that somebody's taking their money away. Music is a very pure form of art. I don't think there should be such tight regulations on it. I think you speak to artists, yeah, they've done their 4th album, yeah, and now they're going to make their 5th. They don't care. They're millionaires. They don't care. They just want people to listen to their music. The music industry shot itself in its own foot years ago by making us pay far too much for a record. You think about artists, someone who's died, yeah, and 50 years since their death, you can take their work and you don't get in trouble for it. You don't have to pay any sort of copyright laws on it. Why is it like that? Come on, for people who've got millions, yeah, and the artists just want more people to listen to their music, let's just stop this.
I mean, you buy a property, it belongs to you. You write a book, it belongs to you.
Okay, it's a good thing you mentioned that because J.K. Rowling, who wrote this Harry Potter series, well, recently a man wanted to make a dictionary of a lot of the terms used in the book, but he wasn't allowed to do this. Do you think that was fair?
Yeah, I do. Why should he be allowed? Because it was her book for the children. Why make it into a dictionary?
Well, there's been, if you look at C.S. Lewis, who wrote the Narnia Chronicles, I've seen dictionaries of his work with his characters, so why shouldn't there be one about Harry Potter? In the day, if it's done in a faithful way that is true and respectful of her work, then I don't see why they shouldn't be able to have a dictionary about her characters. In the day, he's doing her a favour by he's putting that message across to other young readers as well.
Do you think that copyright laws actually put a downer on people's creativity, or if there's any work that people might be afraid to do because of any costs it might involve?
Because, and also I think they're scared of copying another artist as well. So they're scared of copying a particular move or dance or a work or sound, and therefore then they think they're going to be sued, etc. I know it's so easy to make a claim against something as well, you know, it's so easy to sue people these days. Michael Jackson was sued numerous times for work that people had alleged that they wrote. Actually, it was him that wrote it, you know, so people, it's so easy nowadays to accuse.
Society has developed and changed. The arts no longer remain as merely a hobby or a passion. For many people, they are a livelihood, and this requires the financial protection that copyright certainly offers. Each creator, we feel, has a moral right to be named as the creator, and for their talent to be recognised as their own. A copyright not only defends this right as the original, but any future copies or adaptations will still be attributed to the original creator. This is a social benefit in itself, and will prevent, in Isaac Newton's words, new artists from standing on the shoulders of giants.
Copyright is both inaccessible and restrictive, and it is for this reason that it is abused. Numerous reforms have been made to bring it up to date in the online age, but they still do not fulfil the desired purpose. This is because the fundamental aims of the copyright system are outdated, as people resent ownership of ideas, considering that the art thrived prior to its introduction. Currently, a large community exists for continuation novels, authored by those who love literature, yet is founded upon sharing ideas.
April is the cruelest month, breeding lilacs out of the dead land, mixing memory and desire, stirring dull roots with spring rain. I think this is a lovely poem. I have just read you an extract from T.S. Eliot's Wasteland, in which the famous artist heavily referenced other literary works, literary samples if you like. Similar practice also occurs in music, in which sampling is commonplace. In almost every case, the use of these samples leads to the creation of an entirely new idea or concept, or else brings the art to the attention of a very different audience. Unfortunately, under the copyright system, such sampling is stifled.
You're only talking about living artists. So when does copyright come to an end? And how do you feel, for example, about trusts and foundations that collect royalties on the work by licensing the work of dead artists? I'm thinking of something like the Balanchine Trust, for example.
I would like to challenge you and saying, aren't you, in essence, trying to regulate the unregulatable and just providing jobs for the legal profession rather than protection for artists?
When I was at university, my best friend, he still is, he had a car and I didn't. And the reason he had a car was because, this is absolutely true, his father had the copyright on Emmerdale Farm. This is absolutely true, and you wouldn't think you'd be proud of that, but anyway, he was. But it meant that his son was able to run a car when none of the rest of us did, and I never understood why that should be. Why on earth, you know, the copyright of these characters would extend to the son, and indeed now to my friend's children. Defend that for me.
The example that came to my mind was obviously with the Peter Pan novel, and how all the money then goes to the Children's Hospital. In situations like that, it means that his book can then do good for people beyond his grave, so to speak. I mean, recently they re-released an extension of the novel released by someone else, and that meant that a lot of that charity went. So I can't say that I feel fault that royalties are going to a foundation or a trust which continues to help children.
Yeah, but Winnie the Pooh royalties goes to our most famous, and to Westminster School, our poshest public school with the most richest parents in the country. So what's your point there?
We can't, obviously, we can't regulate what people do with the royalties, and if it goes to a posh private school, then that's probably what they want to do. But at the end of the day, the copywriting, I think what copywriting does is it does protect the original. I mean, I can't really see the general public wanting another Winnie the Pooh, to be honest, like a hipped up one, maybe a spy or something. I can't see it happening, and I think that copyright does protect the original. And it kind of preserves the memory, so to speak.
I mean, Shakespeare nicked virtually everything he wrote, every play, every plot, every character. You would ban that.
That Shakespeare had to kind of fulfil certain guidelines because of his patronage, and if and if that's what he was told to do, then he kind of had to adapt it from what he'd been given. And as far as copywriting nowadays, the Shakespeare, his foundations, everything, it is only The Tempest that is copyrighted. It is only his one original work that has any copyright. So people are actually quite free to copy the remaining Shakespeare plays.
Both of you were proposing an idea before the evil copyright rules came on. There was a golden age for arts, etc. It was a golden age where artists were bloody poor. I mean, Haydn was a servant, Mozart died in poverty, and yet you seem to be suggesting, David, that's actually good. You know, that poverty somehow stimulates the creative juices, and it's better to die of tuberculosis in an attic and to at least you make better music that way than at least to be comfortable. That's an appalling proposition, isn't it?
Do you differentiate between the intellectual property associated with a scientific innovation, a cancer treatment, for example, and a new John le Carré novel?
Postmodernism says that there's no such thing as an original idea. Everything's done before, therefore copyright is meaningless.
Is there such a thing as an original idea? If so, what is it? How can you tell what it is? And how can you legally define it?
Now, having studied postmodernism in English literature, I don't like it, so I'm going to speak with a bit of a passion about this. There's no such thing. There's no such thing as an original idea. That's absolute rubbish, to be honest, because I think every person can create something new if they have that in them, and every person can have an idea, have a spark in them, and say, "Yep, there's nothing out there." Find a niche in the market, if you will, and that is an original idea. And if they want that copyrighted, if they want that protected for their own personal reasons, then that should be absolutely allowed, and that is definitely a benefit to the arts, because it then means you don't have other people copying that idea, creating the same thing, and creating kind of a dull monopoly of the same idea, really.
Copyright doesn't benefit art at all. It strangles its very life force. Copyright doesn't even benefit the artists themselves. It's a tool of corporations and big businesses who wish to convert the creativity of artists into just profit figures on a spreadsheet. Let's think, if copyright existed as it does now, years ago much of modern art would cease to be. Dada, the urinal manufacturer, would have sued Marcel Duchamp. Collage, Braque would have been fined. Pop art, Campbell's Soup would have sued Andy Warhol. Each new form, snuffed out, gone.
Copyright is the basis for the remuneration of invention. Indeed, the only other substantial basis for financing invention in all areas is government expenditure, and this is much less effective. If there were no copyright, there would be no money to finance newspapers, books, films, recorded music, or the development of the internet itself. Copyright is the mother of invention. No copyright, no revenue, no innovation.
It protects the artist, not the art. You may have heard that in 2007, J.K. Rowling and the makers of Harry Potter films filed a lawsuit against RDR Books, claiming that their lexicon, an encyclopedia requested by Harry Potter fans, breached copyright laws. Coincidentally, Rowling revealed she had her own plans of releasing a similar encyclopedia once she had finished the Harry Potter series. This act of greed gives strong evidence to suggest that copyright laws protect those with the most money and do not act in the public's interest.
With downloading for free off the internet using things like Spotify and so on, that's introducing all sorts of people to all sorts of music they probably would never ever hear. You know, what's not to like about that, really?
The internet is not a free supermarket. It's not a case that just because it is there on the internet, it should not be protected. It should not have the copyright protection that everybody else is entitled to.
I think the example of Disney sort of highlights how open to abuse copyright is by major corporations, simply because Disney ripped off every fairy tale they could find in old Europe, and then basically pulled up the drawbridge so that no one could take anything from anything they did.
You can still go back to the original public domain story and make your own version. You don't want to take Disney's version of like Cinderella and just paint a new paint on it. If you want to make your adaptation, you take it from the public domain characters originally. You don't take it from Disney's copyright.
You spend a lot of time saying, very eloquently, I thought, how dreadful copyright was, but you didn't really say what your position was.
Scrap less, no copyright.
No copyright. Okay, so that's your position, right.
But an artist, once they've sold a painting, or written a book, how are they supposed to make money out of the consumption of that work? I don't understand how you think they're going to survive to go on to create any more work.
No copyright weeds out lower quality work. as the things that are brilliant, that are absolutely brilliant, will be purchased if you make something that is astounding.
You said that art is a passion, okay? Football is my passion. Should I be paid for my football? Or maybe if I'm at a high level enough to do that and I've got the skills to, then yes. So why is art any different from any other type of labour? Why, if I go and work at Sainsbury's and I go and put stuff and stack shelves, would I be paid for that? And if I make a piece of art which I'm supposedly sharing with the world, why should I not receive some reward for this?
The point is that, Nathan, you articulated the political issue here quite well when you said, why can't I be paid for my art? The point is, why can't we be paid for our art without copyright? Why do we need copyright in order to be paid for the art, right?
Well, it's the money-grabbing corporations that benefit, not the artists who are full of integrity and doing it for the passion. And then we heard how there are artists suing each other, and it's their greed. It's J.K. Rowling's greed that's doing it. And then we again heard, well, it protects the artist, not the art. And we kept hearing this. Protects the artist, not the art. Art is a passion. Well, it's not a passion that people can persevere with if they're not getting paid for it, if they're having to dedicate their time to something else. So I don't understand. You say copyright benefits the corporations, but not the artists. And then you say copyright benefits the artists, but not the arts. But without the artists, how can we have the art? And without the corporations, how can we have a sort of organised art?
Artie Monkeys, they gave out demo CDs at their first gigs. They gave them to their fans. They have no copyright on them. The fans, of their own accord, placed them on the internet. It built up a massive following on the internet. And the band weren't aware of that because they had no copyright on it and it was just happening without their control. And then they became one of the biggest bands in the country.
The perfect example, young artist called Coltrane. He did a very politically apt take on one of Damien Hirst's crystal skulls. Damien Hirst, the multi-millionaire, sued him for every single penny he had. Even Shakespeare would not have been allowed to create King Lear, one of the greatest tragedies of all time, if we had copyright.
Shakespeare actually only gave out the lines to his plays to people who were saying them. I.e., if you were a Shakespearean actor, you'd only get the lines that you were going to say so that you wouldn't get the entire script and be able to sell it on. Shakespeare had to implement his own form of improvised copyright.
People want to reward people who make good art. And we don't really need copyright for that to happen.